Live from man-made horrors beyond my comprehension, this is the Best Care Anywhere podcast. I am your host and last survivor of humanity, Anthony, joined as always by the architect of humanity's downfall, Jared.
Hello.
Don't hello me in that tone of voice. And the one who will save us from the Matrix and lead humanity back to salvation, Ethan.
It sounds like a lot of work.
You don't have a choice.
Ah, fuck.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing? Welcome back to the podcast. And I'm just going to jump right into this. We just had a discussion that probably won't make it. It may or may not make it into the recording, but I'm just going to straight up ask it. Hey, Jared, what have you been up to recently? Because it's kind of interesting and terrifying.
Oh, not much. Just experimenting with AI.
Yeah, that's what we were afraid of. Weirdly, though, I will say this. Weirdly, I found myself looking at the images you've been sending and going like, man, those are really cool. And then like every 5, I have to stop and remind myself like, oh yeah, a computer's just doing this based off prompts. And then I get scared and then I forget and the cycle repeats itself. But
it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it is a vicious and slightly terrifying cycle. Although Swole Dumbledore, or as we were calling him, Dumbledore, was one of my favorite images that has been created so far. It's very ridiculous, and I kind of love it.
I would counter with Stained Glass Keanu Reeves.
Stained Glass John Wick Keanu Reeves is also a vibe. I'm scrolling back through our chat. Anime protagonist Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's one of the moments where I'm like, this is uncomfortable. But
where the fuck was that and how did I miss that? I am scrolling back.
But anyway,
Wilson will be back in a minute.
Wilson will be back in a minute.
I hate them so much.
Yeah. So yeah, you've been playing with AI and you're doing this. I know this is absolutely not MASH related, but you're doing this from your computer, not like an external site, right?
Correct.
Oh boy, how long did that take to learn?
The tutorial 6.5 hours.
The
one I used at least. That's a quick one.
And then after that 6.5 hours, how many more hours or time would you say you've put in learning the little like tweaks and how like getting the vibe of it? Does that
still doing it. I have barely scratched the surface.
Like you're still learning like just the right inputs to give it to get what you want and tweak it.
Mm-hmm.
It's again very cool, but very like this is new and scary. So
yeah, cool. Whatever. I'm attracted to the girl Donald Trump anime that Jared created. What do I do about this?
Step 1, don't admit it live on the internet. Step 2, never say those words in that order again.
I can choose a different order of the same sentence that would make a little more sense, but the truth remains.
No, please don't. Please don't. So yeah, it's been a weird couple weeks. Since I got back from the camping trip, I've learned that my dad is thinking about, aka most likely going to acquire another similar business to his, which is going to be very stressful and interesting. So I've been very busy catching up on artwork so that if and when that happens, things can go as smoothly as possible. But until then, we shall continue as normal. Any updates on your Impala, Wilson? Or is it same old, same old?
Well, I'm flattered you asked. Every day, a little more of it gets taken apart and removed and lost forever. I'm going for kind of a Ship of Theseus build. Like, at what point does it stop being the pile I dragged out of that farmer's field?
Oh boy. So how much, if you had to give like a percentage, how much of the car is getting replaced? Like, is it a 50-50? Are you like stripping it down to the frame and everything is getting replaced? Like how much of the car is disappearing?
No, I'm mostly just fucking around because I just learned about the Ship of Theseus today and have been dying to use it in a sentence. The interior is all getting replaced, but mechanically, the frame, everything that matters, the heart of the car will be the same.
Nice.
Yeah.
So before we get into the final episode, the season finale, season finale, not series finale. The season 1 finale, I do have a tiny bit of follow-up from the last episode. We prompted the audience with more questions than I remembered prompting them with last week. So Donut Eater was kind enough to give some answers to some of our prompts. We asked the question, how many cars do you think Wilson has wrecked? His response was, all of them. Is there a number higher than that? Which, technically...
Good answer, Steve. Good answer,
Steve.
Why the fuck did we get listener responses on that question?
Because we asked.
Oh.
And because we were mentioning how it's amazing that you own 2 vehicles at the same time and one of them is not in an impound lot and or junkyard.
Well, hold on. I've owned 2 vehicles at the same time for 4 years if you include motorcycles.
I'm not including motorcycles.
Do I have to give them the honest answer as to how many I've wrecked?
No, I like keeping it a secret.
Okay.
We talked about the departure of Patrick ADRT as Hojon, and Donut Eater mentioned that his headcanon about Hojon was that he got accepted to the college and got the money to go, but the times we have seen him since then is waiting for the semester to start. So he stays in Korea until it's actually time to go for his classes. Which, okay, fair point. And then there's a very long for a YouTube comment discussion about his enjoyment of Star Trek, which I will forward on to Jared to read because I think he would like some of the thoughts. But essentially it boils down to MASH is his favorite single TV show, but Star Trek is his favorite TV franchise. And he likes them all to varying degrees, but he can understand why some people aren't into certain ones. Cough, Picard, cough. So yeah.
Yes.
And then another random YouTube comment that I love is from the Dropout Gamer, and it says, YouTube, your random and completely bullshit algorithm has bestowed to me more entertainment. I am 10 minutes deep, and I am loving this podcast. So thank you. Thank you, random YouTube algorithm, for sharing our podcast.
And I love you, random citizen.
And I love you, random citizen. God, go watch Megamind. If you have not watched Megamind, go watch Megamind. It is a wonderful movie. So yeah. Anything else non-MASH related we need to discuss? Are we missing anything? I don't know. The last couple weeks have kind of been a blur. I feel like I've been busy and haven't had a chance to like actually vibe with y'all, and I feel bad about that.
Every episode we produce is another 2 weeks that we have gone without dying in nuclear war. And I think we should take a second to appreciate that. Because it's coming, Mashiacs. It's coming.
Did he have a stroke at the end there? What happened?
You're just a beacon of positivity, aren't you?
That is what my name tag says. Really
all
charged
right.
me
beacon
for
of
all
positivity.
The extra letters.
Anyway. Well, let's get into it. The last episode of season 1, we made it. Oh, by the way, guys, happy 1-year anniversary of the podcast. Wow. Yep, wow. The trailer for the podcast went up a year ago last week. So,
yep. So acquaintance. Okay, go on.
He's getting better.
He's getting better. Yeah, a year ago that would have gone on for like 45 seconds. In all seriousness, though, if we hadn't have had a couple episode snafus, we'd be right on track for basically a season a year, which is kind of the vibe. But without further ado, season 1, episode 24, Showtime, directed by Jackie Cooper, who we have seen a lot of, and written by Robert Klane, who we have also seen a lot of this season. He did. Oh, why does it go away when I tab over? He did a couple episodes, and I can't pull them up now because IMDb is dumb. Requiem for a Lightweight Cowboy, Ceasefire, and now Showtime. So we've seen him a couple times writing for this season. First thing I want to say is this is an episode that I've said this a couple times, and this will probably happen several more times as the podcast goes on. This is an episode that for me, I kind of was meh on it for a long time, but watching it again earlier today, getting ready for the episode, I found myself appreciating it way more. So before we go into the detail, just can I get your guys' like initial thoughts on the episode as guys who are seeing it for the first time, especially as a season finale?
Not what I was expecting from a season finale.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not unhappy about it.
Okay. Ethan, what about you? And I'll explain once we get through this first scene, this first couple minutes of the episode, I'll explain why I'm asking this, but I just want to kind of I know it's kind of a weird question asked straight off the bat of the episode.
Oh, I guess I'm so used to modern TV and, all shows requiring a cliffhanger at the end of the season that this was a nice change of pace. I thought the episode as a whole was kind of a diversion from the norm. It just felt different from a lot of the other episodes this season.
Okay. Well, let's get through the first couple minutes and then I'll throw out some of the thoughts I had. Again, looking at this episode a lot more analytically than I have before. So we open and the camp is being entertained by a USO troop, which is the first time we've seen something like this in the show. They're singing, the camp's kind of there, kind of vibing along. The opening number ends and the comedian, the kind of leader of the troop, comes on and starts telling some very corny jokes. But
boy, are they corny.
As he's telling the jokes, we kind of pan through the MASH audience and see that they're kind of not. First of all, he's not funny, according to their senses of comedy, at least. And they're not really paying attention. Like, Hawkeye's kind of reading a book. Trapper's just kind of staring up at him, kind of with the, not 1,000-yard stare, but kind of just like,
everyone is in attendance, but no one is there.
Exactly. Everyone's in attendance, but no one is there. And we have a comment from one of the listeners on Twitter that I'll read later, but he basically said it seems like they're just not, the actors are just kind of, we're told to sit there and they aren't really acting, which definitely previous watches of this episode, I've kind of had that feeling too, but thinking through kind of the events we see in this episode, I think it's mainly that everyone has a lot on their mind at the moment. Like, we're going to see in the first few minutes that Hawkeye and Father Mulcahy kind of have a thing that they're preoccupied with. Henry absolutely has a thing he's preoccupied with. Trapper's preoccupied. Frank is everyone's kind of the show's supposed to be a distraction from, their duties and the war, but the war is also kind of distracting them from the show. So I think that's kind of my workaround and thinking of why they're kind of glazed over a little bit, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of everyone's problems, we kind of have this little montage setting up the I think there's like four and a half storylines going on throughout this episode. And
there's a lot.
There's a lot, but
it's well done.
It's not overwhelming. Exactly. It's very much kind of like a Dear Dad episode where it's these little vignettes of these different things that are going on, which I kind of liked. First up, we have... Oh, hang on. This is going to be hard because I want to stop. There's going to be a lot of little editing because I want to make sure I see... Okay. One of the things I like in this episode is each transition from the comedian to the next little story beat, he ends on a joke or a line that kind of relates to the next scene, but in a very anti-joke kind of way. And I kind of like that. In this first clip that we jump to, he says I really like all the work you doctors, your medics and nurses are doing. We're all in this together, right? And the first conflict we see is Frank and Hawkeye at odds with each other. Hawkeye is trying to get wounded sorted. He tells the nurse to give the patient 1/3 of a grain of morphine. Frank argues with him and says he doesn't need that much, and they go back and forth. I particularly like Frank saying, "Stop, that's an order," and Hawkeye looking at the corpsman saying, "Move, that's a threat." It's like, Frank, you're just
Quit being Frank.
Quit being
Just
Frank for
go be Frank
5
somewhere
seconds,
else.
which is funny because he kind of does stop being Frank for the rest of this episode, and I love it.
He
We're
loosens
gonna
up.
get to that. We're gonna get to that. But they have this argument. Frank, and I never thought about it until today. I didn't understand, or I don't even know if it was really the intention of the writers, but this little argument sets up the events going forward between Frank and Hawkeye really well, and I don't think I've ever really appreciated that this is the catalyst of Frank doing what he does throughout the rest of the episode, because he even says to Hawkeye, "You're going to regret the day you talk back to a superior officer," and it's like, okay, Frank, I see your plan here. If you can't beat him, join him. Okay. So there's that storyline set up. You have a flashback to the USO show where the guy in the comedian, I can't remember the guy's name. Hang on. I've got it here.
Something.
Hey.
Jackie Flash, played by Joey Foreman. So Jackie Flash, we cut back to him, and he's telling this joke about how he's like, I wouldn't mind getting paid to play a little doctor, and he's making a joke about how great it is to be a doctor, and we cut again to kind of the anti-joke, that the opposite of his idea of Trapper and the nurses and Ugly John, shoulder deep in this intense surgery case that Trapper's having trouble with. He's got 2 nurses, 3 nurses almost, Ugly John and himself working on this guy, and it is,
and the father and Ugly John.
Oh yeah. He's clearly stressed, but he still has time to make a pass at a nurse and a bad joke, which Margaret calls him out on. Ugly John's continuing to call out that this dude is barely hanging on and you need to finish up. I particularly like the Trapper asking, "How am I doing?" And Ugly John's like, "You're doing fine. He's terrible." So we set up Trapper's conundrum through the episode, and I like how they were able to also, at the same time, set up Father Mulcahy's conundrum, which is that he wants to be helpful, but because he doesn't have the medical skill, he is, I don't want to say belittled, but he's kind of shunted aside into the role that chaplains and men of the cloth and people like him typically get shunted into in situations like that, which is the emotional support, morale boost, faith-based stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we get to see from kind of his perspective how that can be frustrating when you feel like you can't do something that's tangible. Yeah. So that's something that'll come up again. We then see Henry, who has been nervously pacing and checking his watch in the backgrounds of a lot of these scenes, shouting at Radar that he needs to get his wife on the phone because she is going into labor with not his first child, but another child, which also implies that they have been there less than 9 months, probably less than 6, because of how babies work. So that's the setup for the episode. We're four-ish minutes into the episode, and we've already set up the little rivalry that's going to happen between Frank and Hawkeye. We've set up how Henry is anxious because he's thousands of miles away from his family while his son is being born. Trapper has a difficult, borderline the patient is going to die case. And Father Mulcahy feels useless. And I found myself, I had to pause the episode and kind of stop and sit because I was genuinely surprised I had never noticed before how well they establish and set up 4 different storylines with just these short little, like 30, 40-second scenes, these little conversations. So what did you guys think at this point, now that we've gotten established?
I kind of like the setup that they're using here, the kind of format for this episode. It feels just like a nice end cap to the season.
Mm-hmm. we're just kind of seeing, again, a lot like the Dear Dad episodes. It's kind of day in the life type snippets, but it's a little more, it's not so much event based. It's more not internal struggles, but kind of individual issues that specific people are dealing with, as opposed to plot type events. So yeah, I found it very, very interesting to watch this episode again with fresh eyes.
I thought it was kind of cool to see that they can still kind of yank my chain or shuck my corn a little bit, think I know what's going to happen. I did not expect Frank to be the comic relief of the episode.
Oh my god, we're going to get to Frank being the comic relief, because I fucking love Larry Linville in this episode more than I can possibly describe. We then get, there's four A plots and then one B plot. And I think the B plot is the dentist who we've seen previously, Kaplan, is going home, and he is paranoid beyond all hell that something terrible will befall him in the few hours left he has at MASH. So he won't. First of all, Hawkeye starts out the scene with a great joke. Did you hear the ancient joke about the guy who rescued his outfit? He killed the cook. And I love Father Mulcahy. He's so genuine. He looks up and goes, no, how'd it go? And Hawkeye's just like, oh boy, Father, I know.
Oh, Father Mulcahy.
I know you're innocent, but come on. But to be fair, and I love the acting throughout this episode, because Father Mulcahy's kind of looking down. He's messing with his food because he's thinking about something. We see later he's going to ask Hawkeye a question, and it's clearly in this same scene. So I like that Henry's continuously anxious throughout the episode, and Father Mulcahy is continuously kind of pensive and in thought. So I like that they carried that through the whole episode. But yeah, Kaplan's going home. He won't even get the orders out of his own pocket. He hasn't even used the latrine in the last 18 hours, which, if anything, I think that would be more likely to cause a problem than prevent one. But hey, you do you, Kaplan.
My man's just being real careful.
Real thorough.
Real thorough.
We get a nice little musical interlude from the sisters. And then we jump back to Hawkeye and Father Mulcahy, and Father Mulcahy, we've discussed it before because they kind of hinted to it in a previous episode, but this is going to be a very recurring, I'd say at least once a season, gets an episode dedicated to Father Mulcahy and kind of his role in the camp and how he feels like he's not important and not super useful, but that he is very much... you may not notice him when he's there, but you will absolutely miss him when he's gone kind of person. So he confesses to Hawkeye that he feels like he's not doing any good at camp. He feels like he can't offer anything genuinely tangible other than generic comfort and, support when the doctors are doing these incredible feats of medicine. And Hawkeye responds with that he had a professor in med school that used to always say, God cures the patients, but doctors take the fee. And Father Mulcahy kind of looks at Hawkeye and goes, do you really believe that? And Hawkeye responds with, I'm able to do a lot of things in surgery that I'm not really good enough to do. And that kind of helps Father Mulcahy, but you can tell he's still a little wary. And I was curious, what do you guys think of that conversation, since it's a theme we're going to see a couple times going forward?
Interesting. I mean, I'm always glad to get more of my Father Mulcahy on screen.
Yeah, and there's much better episodes to ask the question I'm thinking about, but there are going to be episodes that go into this a lot deeper, but it's very much the question of belief and faith versus real world ability and skill. I think Hawkeye Hawkeye is definitely played as more of an agnostic character. I don't think he's really atheist, but he's definitely not a every Sunday church going type of guy. But I think he understands that what Father Mulcahy needs to hear is, look, I have a gift to be an incredible doctor, and who am I to say how that gift came to me? And you know what? If you're here as the spiritual person, I think you have some, not some say, but some comfort. More than comfort is something that you give. Like it's not really delved deep in this episode, but in the future we're going to have a lot of episodes that kind of touch on this, you know, kind of the no atheists and foxholes type of idea. Like, I don't know. I love Father Mulcahy and some of the storylines he has because they remind me of conversations I've had with my grandmother before she passed. Because my grandma was a very staunch. She is a fairly staunch Catholic altar society lady. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to some of the conversations we're going to be able to have surrounding Father Mulcahy. But I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it in this early stage. Ethan, what about you? I kind of jumped in right after Jared there. What are your thoughts on this exchange?
Well, it's good you jumped in when you did, because while I would love to echo what Jared said, say any Father Mulcahy is good Father Mulcahy, I'm just a sucker for, Hawkeye's kind of serious moments, that soulful look, that little wisdom. It's just a nice change of pace, and I thought the story was, pretty meaningful. I just think the writing staff was on fire this episode.
Yeah. So while Father Mulcahy is contemplating Hawkeye's words, we once again another little musical interlude. We jump to some more surgery with Trapper and the gang. He's still working on the same patient. The surgery is coming to a close because it has to. The guy can't be on the table much longer. Ugly John is given the updates, and that reminds me of something. Do you guys like John Orchard? Do you like Captain Ugly John Black?
Don't you do this. Don't.
How do you feel? How do we all feel about Ugly John?
You leave Ugly John alone.
I have nothing to do with this.
You do. You say things and then they happen. That's how podcasts work.
I'm going to say the next sentence very carefully. This is the last appearance of the character Ugly John.
God
in
damn
MASH.
it!
This is the last appearance of the character of Ugly John in the series. So yeah, unfortunately, this will be John Orchard's last appearance as Ugly John. Again, we've talked about this. It's been, of the 24 episodes, we've probably brought this up in at least half of them. One of the biggest things they learned in season 1 is that they did not need a dozen full-time in front of the camera cast to make MASH work. They could get good episodes and good stories out of a smaller core group of cast as opposed to a big ensemble, like something you would see in, one of the shows I thought of as an example for this. Have you guys both seen Hogan's Heroes?
Yes.
No.
Jared? Okay. So Ethan, I think you'll understand what I mean by this. How many people were locked up in Stalag 13? In that group, you had Hogan and 6 or 7 other guys that were like his little gang, right?
I don't know.
Is that about right?
That many.
Yeah, but you had, it was 4 or 5 of them, and then what random other guest or agent or soldier got snuck in or out of the camp, whatever, right? Whatever the focus of the plot was in that episode. And then you had Commandant Klink and Sergeant Schultz, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many of the scenes in an episode of Hogan Heroes are the entire cast doing a thing? It's usually like Hogan and one or two of his guys making a plan, or Hogan bluffing or fucking with Commandant Klink or Sergeant Schultz. So even though they had a huge cast of mains, even then they only used a few of them at a time, I think. So I think MASH benefits from learning, hey, we don't need to have all the characters from the book/movie. We can get away with these core ones and kind of develop them more. So I think that's gonna be noticeable in the second season about how they're able to use the screen time with their actors a little better than some other shows. But again, Ugly John's gone. Very sad. I will never be able to scream Ugly John is back. Or will we? Anyway, moving on. We see Hawkeye. I'm not, and like that, we're not talking about it anymore. There's a couple people in the audience rolling their eyes at me for how dumb I'm being, but I love it. So we jump to Hawkeye after a long day of doctoring, going to fix himself a martini. But the still doesn't seem to be working quite correctly, so he fiddles with it and causes it to squirt him in the face with pressurized gin. Hawkeye is confused as to why the still is doing this, and turns to the only other person in the tent, Major Frank Burns, who appears to be reading a book, but quickly darts his eyes up to Hawkeye, realizes Hawkeye's looking at him, darts back down to the book, and you see, this is something Larry Linville is great at doing. You see his upper lip start to twitch as he's trying desperately not to laugh. And let's take a moment and appreciate how wonderful Larry Linville is. Because this is one of the rare moments that we've talked about in this season where Frank is actually not the devil incarnate and the worst human being to walk the planet. He definitely is not great, and I would not want to spend a whole lot of time with Frank Burns. But this is a side of Frank that we basically never see, and I kind of love it. I love that Frank has said, you know what, Hawkeye? All right, you want to belittle me? Okay, I'm going to meet you on your level and fuck with you and see how you like it. And weirdly, Frank's pranks, I'd say, are like pretty top notch. Like well orchestrated, well planned, simple pranks. Nothing too crazy. And I appreciate Frank for that. How do we feel about Frank?
Surprisingly tasteful pranks.
Surprising for Frank? Yes. Surprisingly tasteful.
I'd say overall they're usually better than Hawkeyes in terms of
class,
temper, and class. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something Hawkeye and Trapper seem to be very elaborate and a little over the top. Franks are very simple schoolboy pranks, and I love that about him. As they should be.
How many times do I have to tell you two that you don't fuck with a man's gin still?
Wait, was this? Yeah, that was this season. They siphoned Frank's blood without permission.
And?
They made him wet himself. Those two alone are like beyond the threshold of decency for me.
So, I still don't see the issue here.
Anyway, we're going to talk more about Frank and his pranks in a minute, but we then see Henry clearly stressed. And you know how I know he's very stressed? He is smoking one cigar and has 3 more ready to go in his breast pocket. That man, that man is having a day. Radar's on the phone trying to get in touch with the hospital where his wife is. Henry's becoming a father for the 3rd time, to which Radar responds, they know what causes that now. She has the best obstetrician in town. He could deliver a baby with his eyes shut, to which Radar also responds, that's the only way I'd do it, which I have not had the privilege of witnessing childbirth, I have heard enough stories to know that I don't know if I want to. So, Radar, I'm right there with you. I feel like the question is hanging in the air, and if I don't ask it, someone in the audience is going to be upset. Have either of you witnessed the miracle of childbirth?
Why the fuck? That was not hanging in the air, first of all.
I'm going to take that as a no from Ethan.
You take that however you want. I'm just waiting for Jared's response.
Who's to say?
You are.
Why do I have the feeling at like 2 a.m. tonight, I'm going to get a Discord notification and it's an AI image with the prompt, "The Miracle of Childbirth." Anyway, please, I will give you any amount of money to not do that, Jared. Moving on. Radar gets through. He talks with the hospital. The phone call ends and Henry's like, wait, what, I don't get to talk to my wife. To which Radar informs him, I heard you, don't do it. To which Radar informs him, don't worry, she's not at the hospital anymore. She had a false labor. Which Henry is initially relieved, and then he realizes, oh, so we're still waiting on the baby. Okay. Yeah, I barely remember when my youngest brother was born, and I remember the both times that my brother and his wife went to the hospital to have their 2 kids. I'm glad that I was kind of like on the 3rd tier of people out from that. Just getting like text updates, not having to like drive anyone anywhere, panic. I was just cashiering at a grocery store when my nephew was born. It's like, oh, they're on their way to the hospital. Oh, I'm an uncle now. Cool. Anyway, would you like that back in 20s or 10s? Like, I don't know. Childbirth is interesting. Anyway, I kind of got stuck on that tangent. Anyone want to save me, or you just gonna let me?
Got stun locked.
I got stun locked on childbirth.
Yeah,
which is
big hospital really paying you to cover up the fact that all babies are delivered by storks.
It's not what I thought, where I thought that was going, but all right.
Who are you working for?
Big hospital, apparently.
The storks.
That'll do it.
Anyway, my ramblings aside, we're back to Trapper, Ugly John and Margaret. He's getting ready to close up the patient, but he's lost the pulse. He's going to do some open heart massage. They got the heart going again, but it's going to be very touch and go in post-op. We then see the second of Frank's pranks. The classic bucket of water over the door prank. And we're going to have a scout moment here. Can we appreciate the slip knot that Frank ties there? Can we just have a moment of appreciation for that man's rope work?
Like it was
Look,
nothing.
It's so clean. I don't think it's been discussed on the show itself, but it is canon that Frank Burns was a scout and was a scout master, which
of course he was,
is terrifying. But now that you know that, he does have kind of scoutmaster energy, doesn't he?
Yeah. Sir, I'm sorry, but you can't complete this merit badge at camp. He's going to have to go home with a partial. You were told this. Well, you're going to have to tell that to
my parents came to America in 1937. Which, anyway. But, Hawkeye walks in, triggers the bucket. Hawkeye clearly knows Frank is the one that set it up and just lets it go. And I love that if Frank's shaving, he just starts convulsing with laughter. It's so good. I'm kind of glad to see Frank. Okay, going back to Sticky Wicket, Frank calling out Hawkeye for his patient almost dying. Not a good way to get revenge on your enemies. Subtle, childlike pranks. Excellent way to get payback to your enemies. I am here for Prankster Frank. I need more of Prankster Frank in MASH.
Frankster, if you will.
Oh God, I recognize that was a possibility, and I chose to avoid it. Thank you for going there.
I'm here for you, buddy.
We then learn that Mrs. Henry Blake is with child. She has delivered the baby. It is a son. As Radar clarifies, it's not a girl son. It's a son. And Henry is very happy and elated to be a proud father of 3. So yay, good for Henry. We then cut back to our comedian friend, Jackie Flash, telling corny jokes yet again. Finally gets the camp to laugh at one, which is fantastic. We then see Frank leaving the shower and Hawkeye walking in, and you would think Hawkeye would be like alerted at this point to when Frank is in his vicinity, but okay, Hawkeye. And now this is probably Frank's best prank because, one, I do not know how it's engineerically, physically, or hydrologically possible for this prank to happen. How is there any conceivable way that Frank made the showers do what they do? Because I can't figure it out. This has to be an impossibility. Hawkeye pulls the handle of the shower he's in, and the shower next to him goes off. He pulls the shower handle of the shower next to him, and it goes correctly. So he steps into the other shower, pulls the handle, and it does the same thing again.
Pressure plate on the floor.
Apparently,
he modified a landmine to not be explosive and instead be annoying. Truly the latest of warfare technology.
Frank is barely a capable surgeon. I wouldn't trust him with explosive ordnance disposal.
Well, there was a pretty good chance of him blowing himself up when he did it. And if he didn't blow himself up, then surely Klinger would have, because we've already seen him, try to attack Frank with hand grenades before.
Oh boy.
There's a lot of ways this ends.
I just love Hawkeye being like, this shower is broken. Oh no, this is Frank. And him just standing there, cocked his head and just goes, huh. Oh, Frank. So, I believe that's the last of Frank's pranks that we see, and I do want to mention, because it will come up much later. And we'll probably discuss this in our little season 1 wrap-up. This is probably the best Frank is as a character. Not as a character. This is probably the most tolerable Frank is. He's a stick in the mud, but he has a little bit of humanity and fun just in his own weird Frank way. And he's able to kind of mess with Trapper and Hawkeye, not quite on their level, but enough that he can get away with it. And I always wonder what could have been if they continued that line of thinking with Frank and made him more of a foil to Hawkeye and Trapper and less of a pure antagonist. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's going to be... I say that because it's something we're going to come back to when we see how his character develops. So, and weirdly, we do get to eventually see someone who is more of a foil than a pure villain. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. We get more singing, and I don't mean to blow by the singing, but it is just,
Well, I mean, what
singing.
Are we supposed to do? I will try and attempt it, but
Please
I don't know that I can do a harmony on my own. Jared,
Please
a 1, a 2, a
no,
1, 2,
no,
3. Okay.
No, please no.
Yeah.
We then see, obviously, Henry was very happy to hear that his son was born, but now realizing that he has an unknown amount of time again until he gets to actually meet his new son, he falls into a little bit of a depression. He's drinking with Hawkeye. And even Hawkeye, being single and childless, understands that, hey, you're clearly upset. Don't be afraid to admit that you're upset you can't see your son. And I think I always knew this, but again, looking more analytically and calling it out directly as we're doing this podcast, props to Match for like the positive male like mental health discussion. I know that's like a recent like, I don't want to say like hot button or woke topic, but like
phenomenon.
A recent phenomena is like, hey, men, you're allowed to have feelings and be upset about things. It's okay. Please let it out. But I like that MASH took a moment to be like, hey, dads who are away from their children because of work or circumstances, it's okay to be upset about that. You're not an unfeeling machine. You're a person with emotions. Please express them in a healthy way with friends. Like, props to MASH for that. We're going to see more examples of it, but I just want to applaud.
Go ahead and get Cats in the Cradle playing in the background.
Cats in the Cradle in the Silvers. Oh, yep. No.
Yeah.
So, for no reason in particular, remember how I've said it a couple times, and I think Mike said it once when he was on. There's going to be a couple things throughout as we go throughout the series where I just stop and say, hey, I know you're probably not going to remember this, but just make a note of it for future reference. Henry has a child at home who he has not met yet. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Moving on.
I hate you. You know that I hate you because you know why I know that you hate you. What?
Yes. So yeah, Hawkeye is telling Henry, hey, open up. Please, don't be ashamed to admit that you're upset you can't see your son. That's like very obviously a thing you should be upset about. And the thing I love about this is in the background, you can see at the end of the scene, Henry says something like, yeah, I hope I actually get to see him before he's old enough to get drafted into this war. And you see Radar kind of lift his head and turn. So you clearly tell he's been listening. And I love that you see the moment Radar gets the idea for what we see him do in a few scenes. I love that you actually can see that happen throughout the course of this scene. Again, it's just a nice little, they didn't have to do that, but it's a nice little detail. All right, so we're back to Jackie Flash telling jokes. He delivers a punchline, and Father Mulcahy's still kind of in his little malaise, doesn't hear it, and asks Radar to repeat it, and Radar has to pretend like... I think we've all done this thing where we're watching something and we didn't really hear it, but we kind of got the gist and laughed or clapped or whatever, and then the person next to us leans over, it's like, what did he say? And you have to be like, oh, I actually didn't hear it.
Yeah.
I don't know. You just have to suddenly realize, like, oh, I'm not actually paying attention either. Another, I don't think this is foreshadowing. I don't think this is, let me put it this way, because I don't want to give something away. To the people that know, no, I do not think anything is foreshadowing. I just think it's an interesting coincidence. Jared and Ethan are probably looking puzzled. Don't worry. The audience knows what I'm saying.
I'm looking fabulous. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. I'm very glad. We then get another one of the jokes that is like a weird transition into a scene that joke would be that's what it is. It's a transition into a scene where that joke would be very inappropriate or very uncomfortable. And it's the joke of of the wounded guy being taken to the side. And it's like, oh, why am I being taken this way? He's like, you're taken to be buried. Oh, I'm not dead. Shush, you want to make a fool of the doctor? And it transitions directly into post-op where Trapper's patient is basically about to die or on the verge of going downhill to die. Trapper they're like, we've done everything we can. He's either going to get better or he's not. We see that Father Mulcahy was grabbed from the audience to come attend the patient. He grabs the patient's hand and bows his head in prayer. And it is a little corny. I don't know if corny is the right word. Is it a little corny to have the priest come in, grab the patient's hand and pray, and suddenly the patient is doing better? Possibly. But I still think it's a good way to have Father Mulcahy's story be like, you may not do anything that has tangible like medical value, but the fact that you are here and helping and call it faith, belief, whatever you call it, your presence here is noted and helpful. I think it's nice to have that shown. Even though it is kind of, again, I don't want to call it, I don't know what to call it, but what do you guys think? Did you think this was a little on the nose? Could have been done better, done all right? What do you think?
Pretty on the nose. Pretty
yeah.
corny.
Yeah, it's definitely lacking the nuance that future episodes will kind of do this with. And it's always, to be fair, it's always hard to do this because belief, faith, religion, all that is very, very different to everyone. But still. So the patient is going to be a little bit better. Side note for Ethan, because I think you'll find this interesting. Take a good look at this guy's face, because the next time you watch a bunch of your favorite Westerns, you will probably see it unintentionally, because this dude has like 45 acting credits as townsperson in various TV and movie Westerns. So keep an eye out for townsperson number 6. Played by Stephen Burnett. That's this gentleman's name.
Let's see what he did that I would know.
Let me just read through it. He was in an episode of Rawhide, Laredo, The Rare Breed, Shane, Iron Horse, The Ride to Hangman's Tree, Hondo, The Shakiest Gun in the West, Big Valley, The Wild Wild West, Bonanza, The Virginian, Blazing Saddles.
No shit.
He was literally almost every one of these I've read is townsman uncredited. So, yeah.
Okay, I forgive him.
Also, weird coincidence. We've had Herb Voland as General. Oh God, what general are we on now? I forget which one.
Got a few.
Not Barker, not Clayton. General Clayton. I believe General Clayton, we recognized him as the lead tower controller in Airplane. This guy, Stephen Burnett, was also a tower controller in Airplane. So, random, weird coincidences. But anyway. Probably not, since they were probably just on Fox's call list for shows and stuff. But, so yeah, patient wakes up. Even Hawkeye, I will say this, the corniness is cut a little bit from this scene by Hawkeye turning to Mulcahy and saying, still think you don't do any good around here? And even Mulcahy kind of looks at Hawkeye, it's like, that's not how this is supposed to work. Like, that's magical.
Not how any of this works.
Yeah, that's not how Catholicism works. Like, I don't just have magic hands. That's not how this works. But still. We then get Gary Berghoff just burning the stage to the ground for a solid minute. We love to see it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did we discuss Gary Berghoff's left hand or right hand? Sorry.
We have, yes.
Okay, I can't remember if it was. This is the episode I was gonna save it for, because I think I decided to talk about it literally. But yeah, this is the episode where it's probably the clearest, which is why I was going to bring it up. But yep, not a big deal, because he can still shred on the drums like a monster.
Nice.
We
what
see
a badass.
Yeah, I love how clearly he was playing that live, because you can hear Gary Berghoff screaming as he's doing it. Just, so we see Kaplan's getting ready to go home. He shoves the driver of his Jeep out of the way, disinfects the steering wheel, and refuses a kiss from a nurse, all to avoid any last-minute infections or car accidents. He even says as we're sitting here talking, the propeller of my plane is getting older. He asks Father Mulcahy to bless the Jeep, and I love Father Mulcahy gives blessings the best way possible. Can you bless my Jeep, Father? Consider it done. Like, again, I don't mean to harp on the religious aspects of this episode, but Father Mulcahy will often respond to being asked to pray for something, in a very, not flippant way, but an indirect way, like
nonchalant.
Nonchalant, because, and again, this is why I love Father Mulcahy so much. He knows that true faith true belief comes from faith. So to me, the way I interpret him when he kind of is nonchalant about a prayer is, if you believe that God has blessed your Jeep, then it is so, because that's how faith works, right? Despite this, that's a lovely sentiment, Anthony, but despite this, Kaplan rolls the Jeep. He's wounded pretty severely. The driver's perfectly fine, and I love, that's one of the best line deliveries of this episode is, figures, I'm going home, I'm in pieces. He's staying here, he doesn't bust a pimple. And then he says, when I'm going home, I'm walking, and Hawkeye's just like, I can't even with you right now. And leaves laughing. And then we get what is one of my favorite things Radar does throughout the series, and he does this a couple times. And we're going to have a talk about it next week. Radar, we talked about, started off very much like his movie character. A little more rough around the edges, a little more knowledgeable of the world, a little more one of the guys, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of this season, and definitely into season 2, he's much more naive, hasn't left his hometown, 18-year-old kid. And one of the things they give him is this just pure childlike sense of right and wrong and doing the right thing. And this is one of the first instances where I'm like, Radar is genuinely one of the purest human beings in TV, because he does this a couple times throughout the season where he recognizes someone is not having a great time, and he does something, doesn't just like make them feel better. He finds the perfect thing that will make them just completely fold, break down, feel better. And for this, he goes to one of the Korean laundry ladies who has a young son, and invites her to bring her son to visit Henry. And it is just, do I even need to explain why this scene is wonderful? Because it is. It's Radar acknowledging that someone he cares about is very sad, and he knows how to make them feel better, and just hits the nail on the head of how to do that. So, and it's Radar and Henry, which, as we know, always great to see them interacting in a wholesome way. But, and we can elaborate on this more next week, but what do you guys think of Radar's character throughout this season, going from, do you think it's changed a lot? Is it noticeable? Is it not noticeable? Or do you just kind of lump him all together as Radar?
It's definitely changed. You're definitely been trying to portray him more as an actual young kid rather than just a short adult man. They're definitely trying to head that direction, which I think works well for his character.
Nice. And so Henry is very touched, obviously. He even says, we have work to do, and Radar goes to take the baby from him. He's like, no, in a minute, stop. Let me hold baby. On a somewhat related but mostly unrelated note, my nephew came over and saw the chicks my mom was raising today, and he couldn't stop saying, they're so cute. And it was adorable. And he walked around holding one and petting it, and it was great. Anyway, moving on. What I'm saying is Henry and my nephew are very similar and ridiculous and lovable. I do love the rendition of You Make Me Feel So Young that these ladies are singing. Completely, again, not off topic, but not much to elaborate on there. We then see Frank pranking Hawkeye, as we will learn going forward, is a dangerous game. It's kind of like playing Russian roulette. At some point, it's going to backfire on you. And we see that with Frank. He is got his copy of Stars and Stripes. He heads into the officer's latrine. Hawkeye gives the signal. The tent flap is folded up while Stars and Stripes Forever plays on the camp megaphones. Frank, I love that Frank doesn't get angry. He's just like, yep, well, this was too good to last, and goes back to his business. While Hawkeye kind of looks at him and gives him a salute like, touche, you had your moment in the sunshine, Frank, but it's time to stop. So I love that they gave this little nonverbal fight between Hawkeye and Frank time in this episode, because I think it's a nice little glimpse at kind of what could have been with Frank being part of the camp. But as we will see, they went a different direction with Major Burns. But regardless, Larry Linville is fabulous in both roles. So the episode wraps up with the comedian Jackie Flash saying goodbye, thanking them all for being there, and we see kind of an interesting little credit scene that we don't see since before this episode or since, where they run the credits as a continuation of the episode as they pan through the audience, which is kind of different. But yeah, nice. that was season 1, episode 24, Showtime, the end of season 1. Yeah, what did you guys think of that? And I know it's very different than what we're used to in media. Like, for example, we just had Mandalorian just wrapped up. So we got a season finale for that, and it was building to this thing that was going to happen, and that's what a lot of shows do nowadays. Each season is basically a chapter, but this is very much, as we've discussed previously, older style of television where it's episodic. Everything is contained to a single episode and doesn't necessarily affect other episodes. So what did you guys think of Showtime?
I thought it was very nicely done. The way the episode was written, specifically to be the end of the first season, I very much enjoyed how they approached it. Just a nice kind of like slice of life, just looking at all the characters from the past season, kind of just giving you one last look at all of them before, the show ends for this season and picks up again in another season. It just felt like a nice way of saying goodbye before the second season. I don't know.
Nice.
It was a nice cherry on top for the first season.
Okay. Ethan, what about you?
I did not expect to like it, simply because I hate Jackie Flash so goddamn much. And when they opened with that, I thought, oh my fucking Christ. And then they just backhanded me with what I thought was a really well done episode. So I said it before and I'll say it again. It just had a different feel. I think Jared hit the nail on the head when he said slice of life. It's a good ending of the chapter.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the fact that there are 4 distinct, I wouldn't call them A plots. There's almost like 4 B plots and 1 C plot, because none of the stories are like big dramatic. It's just like you guys said, it's just little slice of life moments for each character. And I think if you were to like look at this, I'm going to make an analogy and I hope it makes sense. If you were to look at the Dear Dad episode, the first Dear Dad episode, as a skill that the show has, if you were going to evolve that episode into another thing, I would say it's this, where, okay, we did Dear Dad, where it's centered around Hawkeye writing a letter. Can we take that concept of little vignettes around camp and do something different with it, like the USO show is, where everyone's the big thing in camp that everyone's going to, but everyone's got like something on their mind, and we see what Henry's got on his mind. We see what Frank's up to. We see what Trapper's dealing with. We see what's bothering Father Mulcahy. I think there is an argument to be made that this episode and a lot more episodes that we see going forward are part of the same, how do I, like, family tree of the, like, if the Dear Dad episode was the catalyst for trying something different, there's kind of like a family tree of episodes that kind of sprout from that. And I think this is the kind of the next attempt at trying something a little different. So, and the stories that they use for characters, I think we get to see revisited. I think not revisited, but used as a catalyst. Like I said, we're going to see a lot more with Father Mulcahy coping with and struggling with what his job as a military chaplain at a hospital is, and how he reconciles and deals with his thoughts on that. I think we see more of Trapper, because Trapper in this episode, and you guys can disagree with me if you think otherwise, Trapper is also a good surgeon like Hawkeye, and gets frustrated like Hawkeye does when he has a patient go south, but he gets frustrated in a very interesting way compared to Hawkeye. Hawkeye dwells on it and gets, I don't know how I want to explain this. Trapper gets very, I don't know. I started on a thought and I don't know how to explain it. He tends to get very cranky as opposed to angry. And I think they kind of expand upon that in an episode in season 2, where we see him respond to a patient going south in a very interesting way. But yeah, I like this episode very much. So I will ask, before we get to the audience, what would you guys rate Showtime?
I think just a nice 4 out of 5.
Okay. 4 out of 5 for Jared. Ethan, what about you?
I'm sitting at 4 1/4. Call it 4.2 out of 5.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm right there with you guys. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I was genuinely surprised. I honestly thought going into this episode, like, this is kind of a weekend to the season. It's just a kind of a, not a dumb episode, just kind of an episode that's just kind of there to fill time. But after watching it, I'm like, oh, actually, this is there's some surprisingly good stuff to pull out of this episode. So yeah, 4 for me as well. Yeah, solid for season, because you mentioned earlier, Ethan, this is different because there's not like a through line for the season and a big cliffhanger at the end. Plot surprise, the cliffhanger at the end of this season is, are they going to get a second season? So, and we can talk about that next week. But yeah, good episode. Comments from the audience. It is time. As usual, we ask the audience, you guys listening, that's you. Hello. How are you? Hi.
Hey, buddy.
Pay attention.
You doing all right?
You doing
okay
good?
Down there?
Are you drinking enough water? Chad Smith says 3.7 out of 5. All season 1 hallmarks are here. The wacky, the touching, and the fun prank off between Frank and Hawkeye. Cheese Smash Forever says 4 out of 5. Definitely a good episode. Really enjoyed the shots of the band of the comedian. On to season 2 and more great episodes. Donut Eater says 4.3. Not my favorite framing device, but the stories are good. Frank pranking Hawkeye is one of my favorite Frank storylines. Henry missing his son's birth and holding the Korean baby, and Mulcahy discovering his worth in camp were great moments, giving each much deserved depth. This lightsaber kills fascists. Well, Twitter.
Whoop, whoop.
hang on. Side note: we've said this before. This man had to write 2.5 tweets. Give him the full 280. Up his character count.
Yeah,
Elon, I'm talking to you. You rocket blowing up, launch pad destroying son of a bitch.
and we know you're listening.
We know you're listening.
Is that it's actually his fault that it blew up. Anyway.
Oh, what?
Oh, good lord.
We're gonna have to talk about that later.
I feel like, I mean, technically, yes. Anyway, this lightsaber kills fascists. I feel like watching this episode, you could tell they weren't sure they'd be back for another season. It doesn't feel like a season finale and feels like the Dear Dad episodes. I agree. Regardless, it's a fun and heartfelt way to end the season of growing pains. This episode does foreshadow the more heartfelt and melancholy tone of the show that we would get in subsequent season, and gives a glimpse of what the show could have been if Frank was a more competent antagonist to Hawkeye. 4 out of 10. Yeah, so I'd say melancholy is a good way to describe the feel of this episode. Like, there's happy moments, there's a little bit of drama, but it's mostly melancholy. And I think that goes back to, at the beginning, I mentioned this, the camps there and at the USO show, but they're not present. They're kind of melancholy and lost in their own thoughts and problems. But yeah, and I also agree, if they had done more with Frank to make him less of a cartoon and more of a human, he can still be an antagonist. You can have an antagonist, but still, respect them as a person. But yeah, the what ifs of MASH, I have a love-hate of discussing, but eventually we will have a discussion about the alternative versions of Frank we could have seen. We're going over to Instagram now for the first time in a long time. Yep, Instagram's not usually the everyone's favorite method of conveyance for ratings, but we got one from fun fact, the summer camp we worked at had 3 Jareds. Jared of the land, or Jared of the nature, Jared of the rocks, and Jared of the water. Jared MGO3, which is Jared of the water, definitely a more somber episode, but getting to see Radar on the drums again was worth a watch on its own. 3.8 out of 5. So yeah, very, very on par with all right around 4.0. So I think
Jared's just have a really good opinion on this episode.
Jared's have good opinions. Yep.
Hi, Jared. I miss you.
So
I miss him too.
With that all said and done, we are done with season 1. The plan, so long as mass humanity-ending crises don't occur between now and then, the plan is for the next episode to be kind of a season 1 little discussion. I have been keeping a little pad of questions I would like to pose to you guys, again, being first-time viewers of the show. I want to get a couple thoughts on the season, more broad thoughts on the season as opposed to specific episodes. And that also means I would like to open it up to the audience to pose questions to us. Is there something about season 1 you want to ask about? Our thoughts on anything? You can share your thoughts on stuff. Is there something in one of the episodes you think we should have delved into a little more that you want us to bring up? This is basically last call for stuff on season 1. So if you have questions, thoughts, comments about season 1 as a whole, or just questions for us in general, like, why not? Go to the Twitter, go to the Instagram, go to all the places, hit us up. There will be some sort of tweet asking for your guys' comments. There will also be a pinned tweet asking for any last-minute episode ranking. So if you have joined our lovely podcast recently and have not had a chance to share your thoughts on, like, the first half of season 1, or this will be your opportunity to get those rankings in, because I'm looking at our little spreadsheet of data, and there are some very interesting things that I want to ask about and bring up and talk about next week. But yeah. And then the week after that, so a month from now, we're going to watch the MASH motion picture, the original 1970 MASH movie that was kind of the catalyst for the TV show getting made. If you have not seen it, I recommend finding it or acquiring it somehow. Insert Pirates of the Caribbean music here. Because
Note for the
it
editor.
is, I think it is worth watching if you haven't, just to get an appreciation of where the show came from, but also how different the show is from the movie. Because the movie is, we'll talk about it. It's an experience. But yeah, thank you guys, everyone, for listening along. And the analytics have been consistently growing, so thank you for listening, watching, sharing, commenting, all the trigger and buzzwords that I'm supposed to say for content on the internet. It really does mean a lot, and I'm glad everyone is enjoying the program. Are there any last thoughts from you gentlemen before we skedoodle on out of here?
Potassium. It's good for you.
Potassium. Okay.
Eat
Ethan?
a banana.
Eat a banana.
Radar O'Reilly absolutely fucking shreds on the drums with a screwed up hand. So I guess what I'm asking is, what's your excuse?
And with that,
we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
The time has come for us to say sayonara. My heart will always be yours for eternity.